A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have been repaid many-fold, and the end is not yet.
The year was 1954, and it had only been 9 years since the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, decimating the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Over 200,000 people were killed in the blast. Some were eviscerated instantly, and others endured a slower, more excruciating death from the radiation in the atmosphere. Atomic radiation doesn't just kill, it leaves people burnt, malformed, and at high risk of various cancers and diseases. While the bombing was necessary to end the war, the loss of so many innocent Japanese civilians, it can't go unnoticed. It left people shaken and traumatized for years to come. Not just in Japan, but around the world. The fact we were capable of developing such weapons, it set a scary precedent for the future. Who would be next? What would be next? They were all questions that lingered in the back of people's minds long after the war had ended. And one of these people would be a producer for Japanese film studio Toho. His name was Tomoyuki Tanaka. Tanaka aimed to co-produce a film with Indonesian producers, depicting Japan's occupation of the country during World War II, with the story of a Japanese soldier falling in love with a half-Indonesian girl during his stay. However, the project fell through due to rising anti-Japanese sentiments in Indonesia causing Tanaka's visa to be rejected, with every negotiation attempt he made being unsuccessful. On his way home from one of these attempts, Tanaka would look out into the sea, pondering what lies beneath. This thought, combined with Japan's lingering anxiety towards nuclear radiation, sort of sparked a light bulb moment for him. With films such as The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and the re-release of King Kong making waves in Japan, Tanaka wanted to make a monster movie of his own. Not only would it be a monster that came from the sea, but it would be born from nuclear testing, as a way of representing Japan's current anxieties. The pitch to Toho's executive producers was a success, with Tanaka putting together a team that would become legendary in the Japanese filmmaking industry. There was Eiji Tsuburaya as the film's special effects director, a man who would go on to create Tsuburaya Productions in the Ultraman franchise. Akira Ifukube would compose the iconic theme alongside the soundtrack for several other Godzilla films going forth. The screenplay was done by Takeo Murata and Ishiro Honda, the latter of which would also be the film's director and the director of plenty of other Godzilla films going forth. And the 2 men in the suit would be Haruo Nakajima and Katsumi Tezuka. And this would actually be the first film to use this method of putting a guy in a rubber suit with model cities and whatnot. Godzilla is widely considered to be the father of the tokusatsu genre. It was originally going to use stop motion like King Kong, but it was considered too time-consuming and expensive. So they mostly stuck with the suits and only used stop motion for specific elaborate shots here and there. This movie was a huge success, as evidenced by the fact this franchise now has over 30 films with even more on the way. It made upward of 152 million yen on a 101 million budget, which nowadays equates to 2.25 million on a budget of 1.5 million. USD, because I'm American. And speaking of American, the American re-release would net an extra 2 million, in its dubbed and edited version known as Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Which, looking back, it's kind of funny how the iconic King of the Monsters title originated from an American localization. It was never once said in the Japanese original. Over there, the movie's simply called Gojira. This Americanized version had some changes to accommodate for American audiences, such as removing explicit references to World War II in order to make it a more digestible, generic monster flick, and the addition of a new American character named Steve Martin, played by famous actor Raymond Burr. While Burr is a talented actor, and the work that went into editing him into pre-existing footage in a world before green screen technology was pretty impressive, this is, for all intents and purposes, a much worse version of the film. Steve Martin contributes nothing to the plot beyond just narrating stuff that's literally happening on screen like we're children. And the removal of the anti-nuclear messaging kind of defeats the entire purpose of the film. Like, this movie came out in an era where these wounds were still fresh, and commentary on these matters was still being widely censored. So Godzilla wasn't just a great monster movie, but it was bold commentary. It had the courage to portray things that other films just didn't. And in order to see what I'm talking about, let's just jump into the film itself. The movie opens up with a reference to a real-life current event, where a fishing boat named the Daigo Fukudo Maru had all 23 of its crew members contract acute radiation syndrome from nuclear fallout. It was caused by America's nearby thermonuclear weapon tests, and their radioman Kobuyama Aikichi was considered the first to die from the effects of a hydrogen bomb. And a similar thing happens here, but instead of dying from nuclear radiation, it's a giant sea monster from below that wrecks their ship. One man escapes on a raft and washes ashore a nearby island called Odo Island, where after explaining to the inhabitants what happened, an elder speculates that it was the work of a creature known as Godzilla. Godzilla has actually existed for some time before the nuclear testing, being part of the island's folklore as a monster who lives under the sea and only comes up in search of food. They would typically offer him stuff like fish and cows, but when times were dire, they would sacrifice human women on rafts. An interesting aspect of the character that's never really been revisited as far as I'm aware. It's probably the one time where Godzilla actually feels like a god, even if that part of his name was only an American edition. Anyways, the villagers try performing a ritual to ward him off, but it proves to be a fruitless effort, as Godzilla comes and destroys their village in the dead of night anyways. What I like about this scene is how you don't actually see Godzilla at all. You hear his footsteps, you see the damage being done, but the actual figure has yet to be revealed, and I think that makes him more intimidating. It leaves a lot to the imagination, and it also lets you better step into the villagers' shoes, as the dark and stormy weather probably made it so they couldn't even really make out what he was. All we know is first there was a village, and then there wasn't. All that was left behind are some footprints and the shape of a tail being dragged across the sand. Slightly before this attack, there were some helicopters surveying the area looking for survivors of the shipwreck, so they bore witness to the attack and decided to report their findings to the press, with the government swiftly taking note. A paleontologist named Dr. Kyohei Yamane takes interest in the creature, and assembles a group to go onto Odo Island to explore this creature's nature firsthand, with 2 members of this expedition being his daughter Emiko and her boyfriend Ogata. While observing the footprints left behind, Dr. Yamane takes note of how radioactive they are, but before he could explore this any further, Godzilla comes back, finally showing his face in broad daylight, and okay, let's talk about this suit design for a sec. Look, the original Godzilla suit might look a bit goofy at some angles, and it may have weighed like 200 pounds and made its actor pass out on multiple occasions, but when it works, I think it really works. Like, it's important to note that this movie is primarily set at nighttime, so that combined with the fact that it's black and white makes Godzilla primarily shrouded in darkness. It conceals some of the janky details and highlights his silhouette, and it's a very strong silhouette. I feel like a lot of Godzilla designs would fall into the trap of just kind of making him look like a dinosaur. Granted, it's a cool dinosaur, but he's just kind of like a naturally smooth-looking dinosaur. But 54 Godzilla's body is very mangled, and it looks like he got melted by nuclear radiation. And another thing I like is how his head kind of makes the shape of a mushroom cloud. Anyways, in this first scene, Godzilla really doesn't do much, he sort of just comes and goes, but thankfully Dr. Yamane grabs a picture, which he presents to government officials and provides his theory that Godzilla was a creature who was likely awoken by nuclear testing happening in the South Pacific. He warns the government to not make this knowledge public, as it throws things into pure chaos, but they don't listen, and the military starts making their first move, ensuring the citizens will have nothing to worry about because the military is gonna save the day. And yeah, it follows the standard kaiju routine. They try dropping bombs onto his habitat directly, but he just fucks them all up. What may seem standard and predictable now was actually quite impressive, because in this era, movies commonly portrayed the military as like this infallible, will always save you type of force. It's kind of reflective of how the real Japanese military wasn't able to do anything about the atomic bomb drops. Dr. Yamane believes humanity won't be able to beat Godzilla with their current level of technology, and he instead wishes to study him and find the secret to his power, but that's not going to stop the military from trying anyways. Desperate for ideas, Emiko visits one of her childhood friends, the reclusive scientist Dr. Serizawa, who also denies the possibility of defeating Godzilla. It's also at this meeting where the movie introduces a love triangle between Emiko, Serizawa, and Ogata, with her loving Ogata and Serizawa loving Emiko, but she only sees him as a brother. It's just a nice little layer of drama to add onto our human trio, something future Godzilla movies would kinda neglect, which is why you have people always complaining that the human plots are so boring. But I don't think it's the case with this movie. I really like all of the human characters. Anyways, Emiko notices how stressed out Serizawa seems, so he decides to show her something with the promise that she won't tell another soul about it. After agreeing, she's brought into his lab, where he shows a new type of weapon he's developed called the Oxygen Destroyer, which does exactly as its name entails. Just plop it in the water and it destroys the oxygen atoms, thus instantly suffocating and disintegrating any living creature within its range. He even uses some poor fish as his test subject, and this understandably horrifies Emiko, as this thing is like way more dangerous than any atomic bomb could ever be, and it's for this reason Serizawa is adamant at hiding it and never letting it fall into the government's hands. We then get another Godzilla rampage, with this being the first time we directly see him leveling a city, and it is as great as the rest of the film. Everything I said about the suit working better in darker shots is proven here. And it introduces some staples like Godzilla destroying a train. The model sets do a good job at making the city just look like a plaything to him. He truly feels like an unstoppable force. Mass evacuations are held, and later the military carries out a plan where they'll lure Godzilla into a line of electric towers, shocking him with over 50,000 volts. But this ends up backfiring, as not only do the volts not really hurt him, but they piss him off enough to deliver his first ever atomic breath. And the atomic breath isn't fire, it is just pure atomic radiation. I love to see the different mediums they apply to make this scene work. Like, of course there's the classic suitmation, but this is where you see the stop motion come into play, and they use this little hand puppet to do Godzilla's atomic breath, and yes, it does look a little goofy, but like, come on, it's a cool scene. Not just because it's a monster wrecking shit, but there is the more serious human perspective. Like, the entire city of Tokyo gets absolutely eviscerated. We get these low shots that paint how massive he truly is, and people are running, screaming for shelter, for family, and this line right here especially always gets me.
お父ちゃまのそばへ行くのよ。ねえ、もうすぐ、お父ちゃまのところへ行くのよ。
Like, God, what a fucked up scene. No other Godzilla movie has, like, given us shit like that. You could just feel the helplessness as the military is throwing out whatever shit they can think of and immediately failing. And God, the aftermath scene is even worse. We see homes in ruins, people huddled in a hospital suffering from injuries and intense radiation poisoning. And there's just this one gut-wrenching scene where a child is crying for her mother in Emiko's arms. Like, Jesus Christ, dude, and this moment is understandably Emiko's final straw, and as she pulls Ogata aside to break her promise to Serizawa, telling him all about the oxygen destroyer and how it just might be their only hope against Godzilla, so the two head over to his lab and try and convince him to use it. Serizawa understandably gets a bit pissed, even threatening to destroy the weapon, not just because Emiko broke their promise, but unleashing this weapon onto the world may only result in even more despair. He kinda be putting himself into an Oppenheimer-esque position, where the military may use this weapon to destroy thousands and all sorts of wars to come. And who knows, maybe even using these will unleash something that's even worse than Godzilla. And that's what I love about this film. The real monster here isn't Godzilla, it's humanity. And I know that's a very cliche thing to say, but in this case, it's just kinda true. Godzilla really was a natural result of humanity's decisions. He isn't some malicious entity hellbent on taking over the world. He's just a wild animal responding in a way any animal does when it's threatened. Serizawa's question is never, can we beat Godzilla, as he has a weapon capable of doing so in the first act. He just isn't sure if we should beat Godzilla, cause sure he poses a threat in the short term, but would using this weapon be worse for humanity in the long term? However, he sees the reports on TVs and realizes he's underestimated just how strong Godzilla is, and that if he doesn't use the destroyer now, humanity will be doomed either way. There's no point in asking what ifs about the future if there will be no future. And so he gives in and decides to use it, but with the caveat of destroying all his research surrounding it so humanity may never use another one. After agreeing, a team is sent out to sea where Serizawa will be lowered down to activate the device and destroy Godzilla on his own home turf. And the mission goes smoothly. Serizawa goes down and activates the device, but at the last moment he does something that shocks everybody. He cuts his cord, as the research on the oxygen destroyer didn't just exist on paper, but it exists in his brain, and so long as he's alive, there always exists the possibility of the government trying to pry it out of him. So in this moment, not only is Godzilla killed, but so is a weapon that may have been even worse, all at the cost of a great man. One who wishes Ogata and Emiko a happy future in his final moments. And as Ogata and Emiko mourn the loss of their friend, Dr. Yamane reminds both the characters and us as viewers that if nuclear testing continues, then there very well may be another Godzilla someday. And next time, there won't be a Serizawa to save us. What a fucking beautiful film, man. Like, this isn't just a great Godzilla movie, it is just a great movie in general. It is one that I could recommend to literally anyone, as it is still relevant 70 years later. You can't rely on your government, and you can't rely on a big fictional sci-fi device to save the day. It is our responsibility to not let another Godzilla reawaken. The greatest scenes in this movie aren't the ones where Godzilla's smashing buildings, and granted those are awesome, but they're the moments that showcase human resilience in a time that feels like the entire world is ending. Like the scene of the young girls singing Prayer for Peace as people are being consoled and tended to is simultaneously heartbreaking and beautiful. Saddening that the world has reached this point, but amazing people could still push on despite it. It's a movie that says a lot of things at once. It's a warning for things to come if we don't change our ways, a showcase of perseverance, and a gut-wrenchingly realistic depiction of the horrors Japanese citizens and others alike endured throughout the war. It's a very multifaceted piece of art. It's one that's deserving of the legacy it's upheld, and I seriously implore you guys to try it out. It's got great characters, stunning cinematography, and an extremely atmospheric OST that more than makes it worth the 90-minute romp. And it's not hard to find either. It's on plenty of streaming services and has plenty of physical releases. Just make sure you avoid the watered-down American version. There's no reason to ever watch that beyond nostalgia or historical reasons. And before you ask, I do indeed plan on covering other Godzilla movies in the future, likely in batches sorted by era, like the Showa Godzilla Retrospective or the Heisei one. But I felt like this movie was deserving of its own video, not just because it's the basis for various movies across different eras, so lumping it solely into Showa would feel weird, but I feel like it's so drastically different from most of the other movies, tonally and historically. Like, it would feel kinda weird and almost distasteful trying to discuss, like, World War II trauma in the same video as Godzilla vs. Megalon. Like, this movie was released so soon after the bombings that it feels like a genuine vent piece from very recently mass-traumatized Japanese filmmakers. And that's not something I really feel comfortable in turning into a shitpost. It's why this video had a more serious tone than usual. But yeah, Godzilla 1954, it's a masterpiece. It's not something I could totally do justice in a 20-minute video, so go check it out for yourself. Maybe I'll tap back into this serious tone in the far future where I cover Godzilla -1.